These are three of our student ambassador fellows who we've had the honor of working with all year. So we're super excited for them to talk a little bit more about their experience as students, and especially within the dual enrollment sector. That's one of the priorities of TSC that we've been working on, especially this month. So for these students to have a platform to talk about their stories, to share their experiences, we're super excited to have them share it all with you. So just starting off with our first question, how did you first learn about dual enrollment opportunities and what barriers, if any, did you face in accessing or enrolling in these courses? And whoever would like to start us off can go ahead and do so. And I will also go ahead and drop the question in the chat if that makes it a little easier.
I can go first. So hi everybody. I forgot to mention when I started dual enrollment. So I was very lucky to start it my freshman year of high school, and which is very rare for a lot of areas to start. Usually you start in your junior year and you do like the 2 year associate's degree, but I was lucky to do it my freshman year. And how I learned about it was actually my brother went to the high school. It's called Dolores Huerta, and we he did the program his senior year instead of his like junior year. And my dad, I'm very grateful for him, but he is very on top of us to like get ahead in life. I'm first generation, so he always wanted a better life for me and my family. So when he heard about it from my brother and how he kind of got a late start to it, he really pushed me to start it a lot earlier and get ahead on it. So I'm very lucky to have that support system in my life that pushed me to get it. So I learned it from my brother technically, and my dad pushed me to go to it. Some barriers I had was definitely feeling ready enough. I mean, it was kind of good because I talked to a lot of advisors on campus and I knew a lot of people and they helped me get into it, but definitely getting out over that mental barrier of being able to actually do it and actually go to college is very difficult without having a lot of people be in those spaces already. Other than that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to whoever would like to go.
I can
Yeah.
go.
Oh,
Oh,
Lenyx, you can go.
you're totally fine. So I will say I was in a very fortunate position in my state. South Carolina is one of the few in the South as a whole that has a lot of integration with dual enrollment. Pretty much every high school has it in some capacity. I specifically went to a unique version of these high schools, which is a middle college. It was something I was told about very early on, even in middle school, as an option where they integrate the idea of workplace engagement along with the content with your degree. Classes, they actually require you to take some. They stop offering things like Spanish and higher level math to force you to do it at the college. So was very fortunate in that. And when it came to it, a lot of the things I just had to do with it was put my interest down for a lottery because they are a charter. But they're a public charter, and so to make it as fair as humanly possible, they do the lottery system. It's a very small school. I was the first class with 100 people to graduate, if that tells you anything. But when it comes to barriers, a lot of the things that I had found, I had transferred from one middle college to the other. And so that was an interesting thing to happen. But also to kind of hear about how it could alter your things with your GPA. Actually, that was something I had not really even thought about. And it did actually impact some of my scholarship opportunities due to the small class size and how college GPAs kind of mess with your overall. Along with just knowing how college worked because I'm a first generation student. This was my first jump into it, and then on top of it, COVID happened. So it was very much a weird dynamic to go from that to half online everything. But with that, I will pass it along to Maxwell.
Yeah, thank you. So I first found out about the program because my dad did dual enrollment in Minnesota. When he was younger, he benefited so much from getting that early exposure to the program's ability to just put responsibility, you know what I mean, into the hands of the students, which really serves them well ahead of going into college. Thereafter. And then as for the barriers, very similar to Vashti, like there is a learning curve, definitely to first going to college. And like I know for me it was like I was sort of I felt like am I really like, you know, deserving of being called a college student. It's like, whoa, you know what I mean? That's like way over there, you know. But overcoming that, and genuinely just giving it my all, you know, there's a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning there, but we made it through. So
Great, thank you. And you all talked about how you learned about dual enrollment, whether that be because it was integrated in high schools across the state or because you learned of it through familial experiences. But I guess that kind of leads us on to our next question, which I'm dropping in the chat now. But do you feel like dual enrollment opportunities were equally accessible to all students at your school? And why or why not? And Lennox, if you'd like to kick us off, feel free to do so.
Yeah, of course. So I will say I was in a very fortunate position, like I said. But even with that, I would not say that the way we handled dual enrollment in our state would be described as very equitable, and accessible, partly just because of how they're structured. While we did have the opportunity to do courses, and pretty much every high school had the opportunity to do so, um, it's whether or not they told you how to do so. And so those of us who were really interested and understood what that meant, like myself, we poked at that a lot, and asked about how that works, how to get involved. But when it came to students who didn't really know what dual enrollment meant, hadn't had someone that said, hey, dual enrollment is just early college classes, and that you have the opportunity to do things like earn an associate's, or like one of my classmates did earn three. That was a lot. That's something that we didn't really have all the access to, and unequal access and like how to utilize them and track them. That was something that we really didn't talk about. Um, Along with just the fact too, the school I was at, which is known in our state for being one of the best with dual enrollment and also consistently ranks very high, with educational data. It only accepts certain students in that you have to keep 80% to stay. If you're not meeting competency, you don't get to, you're on academic probation. And if you don't fix that by the end of the year, you are asked to leave, which is not very equitable, as you can imagine. And so it kind of writes out other students who could utilize these same programs same way that I did, but who do not have the resources and everything else to kind of keep afloat and do all of that in one sitting. With that, I'd also like to go.
yeah, okay. So I can say on that too. That's super interesting to hear because so I went to an online charter school out of St. Paul, Minnesota. And I attended from northern Minnesota. So uh it was interesting how they did it because it was very much mentioned by your classmates, like like among the people that were actively involved in the clubs and stuff, it seemed like literally most of them were doing it. And that was so interesting. And a big part of the reason why is because my school was not restricting credits like at all. I think they had a restriction of like 21 credits, but that was it. And that's an extremely high bar, you know. So because of that accessibility, I think that it was definitely very, very accessible at our school. And I think there's a lot that other schools can take from that. That makes sense.
My experience, it was definitely not equally accessible for sure. So just looking into my school, we only had, I went to a pretty small school as well. I'll one up Lenyx a little bit. We only had 50 students graduate our senior year. It was tiny, but and we were a pretty small school. So we only had one advisor for like the whole high school level. And you could imagine her workload on a daily basis. I was very lucky to have been starting that school when they did, because they're three schools, so there's middle school and elementary. So I was there since elementary. So I got to know her pretty well, and she liked me, thank goodness. And she kind of pushed me to do dual enrollment as well. But if you didn't know her at that level, she really, like, unless you went to her and then asked for help with dual enrollment, she wouldn't tell you about it. And obviously, you could hear it from teachers and professors, but they weren't really engaged in how to enroll you like she was. So it was definitely inaccessible, especially for students in my community. I come from a pretty rural area. A lot of students pick up jobs in high school to help support their family, and a lot of them work after school, etc., and aren't engaged in school activities. So a lot of them either thought they couldn't do it or they just don't have the time, they think, which isn't true because I think I had way more time to do more extracurriculums that helped me going to concurrent enrollment. But yeah, it was definitely not easily equally accessible within my own school. Even looking out to my other local schools, they had completely different frameworks for their dual enrollment. Like they actually had to pay for their dual enrollment programming, for their classes. And I'm very lucky that my school didn't make me pay. We did have to keep above a certain grade. Within each class, unless we did have to pay that course back, but that was it. And we were only allowed to take 12 credits a semester. But anyways, at other schools and high schools, they did have to pay for those courses and still have to do like their high school course all along with those college courses, which was just so much. But yeah, it was not equally accessible in my point of view. But I hope to sort of support that more in the future. And I hope I answered that correct question correctly. I'll hand it over to Christian now.
Yeah. And I guess that brings a follow-up question because I myself was also in dual enrollment in high school, but dual enrollment was kind of like a newer thing when I began, or at least at my high school, it was kind of a newer thing. And I remember, though it was free, they had like ambassadors who would go, they would help us register. Sometimes they would have to send us off to the actual campus where there was no way to access the campus because people didn't have access to transportation. So I'm curious to know if you all had any difficulty with like enrolling or like getting to classes because of a lack of like transportation or a lack of assistance from like a professional to help you enroll.
I can say with that. So, my college was amazing, like the best. They had online classes. That was just golden. I was able to take online classes all the way through my associate's degree, and that was absolutely needed because we didn't have the most reliable vehicles. So and we lived 100 miles away from our college, so we needed to navigate that. And that was huge. So that's a huge solution, because I know a lot of other schools and universities do not offer that, or they have some hybrid, but you can't get a full degree without regularly being on campus. So if anyone else has anything to add.
I sure do. This question was really close to home for me because I did not have a car throughout high school, and I also lived kind of far from the community college that I went to. And yeah, transportation was such a huge issue for so many of us. The school for like the first 2 years that I did it offered bus rides to like in the morning at 8 a.m. they would drive us to there, and then at 12 p.m. the bus would take us back to campus. But there was no like bus to like for students that had afternoon classes to come pick us up and take us back to school because some of us had siblings that we had to go pick up. And so we had to find a way to get back to campus after those programs. So that was really rough for me, to have to go back to campus at the end of the day. We luckily did have a walking path, but it was really sketchy and we shouldn't have been taking it. And it took like an hour to like start walking to get back to the high school from the community college. So definitely transportation was a lot of issues for a lot of students. I know a lot of my friends didn't do it because they just couldn't find the transportation to do it. And not to mention food too. I mean, or high schoolers and college students need to eat, and luckily high schools offered food, but we often missed lunch because we were at campus or traveling from campus to the high school. So that was a very big issue for me. And yeah, it was challenging with transportation issues. And then after the 2 years, they just didn't offer transportation at all. And I was lucky to have friends that had the same courses as me. But yeah, if you had like a morning class that was like way earlier than 8 a.m., sometimes I had like one that started at like 7:45. That really sucked. And then I had labs in the afternoons that went till like 5. So yeah, there's definitely transportation issues, and I'll stop talking now, but I'll leave it off to Lenyx if she or they have anything to say.
Yeah, I would say it's very interesting because it's this very sharp contrast. Again, this is a thing where I'm learning as I've gotten through all these experiences that I am very thankful to be in the state that is known for the corridor of shame. And that they've done a lot of work, especially in this area, to kind of fix things. And while there's definitely some potholes, which we're also known for, there's definitely things that will help. So part of the thing where I mentioned I'm in a middle college. One of the unique components of the middle college is that they are always built on top of a college campus. So genuinely, my high school was here, down the hill was the college. And so you would walk straight there. There was no transportation of like, okay, I first period is, English, and then I'm gonna go do my college psych class, 30 minutes away. That was not our experience at all. The way they structured it, it'd be like first period is this, because we also did block scheduled, same way like colleges actually do function. Where it's the Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, and then the occasional thing that's rude on Friday. We would have four periods in a day. First period, an hour and a half, whatever. The high school, we'd walk our little behinds down the hill and go to our classes. And some students would make the active choice sometimes to go take courses on the other satellite campuses. But there wasn't really a transportation issue on that front. However, because of it being a charter, there actually wasn't busing at all. Even though state law mandates it because of that weird, it's a public charter component, they actually were not required to have buses. And so you had to get to the high school, which for me was a bit of a difficult spot because it was 30 minutes away. So got some help, but then also traded off in others. So it's definitely something where um, we did have some issues, some students who were wanting to come from further away in zip codes who were zoned technically for the school and wanted to benefit, could not do it because of the transportation component. Then others who were on campus found it very easy because they were able to just walk down to the college and walk right back up. So there's a double-edged sword, but it was very interesting to see because other middle colleges were not even as well resourced as we were. And it just went to show like how different that access was.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to hear that though all of our experiences with dual enrollment were very different, they also were rooted in some of the same issues with like the transportation issues, the basic needs issues that were facing these students. Um, but shifting from that question now to more so like your experience within the classroom, how did the rigor and expectations of your dual enrollment courses compare to your high school classes? And what supports, if any, helped you succeed in those college dual enrollment courses?
Yeah, so I can take on this one first here. So, I would say that comparing it to the high school classes, if I remember right, I know that we had a lot more flexibility when it came to due dates. There was a lot more accommodations on things like grading, which was, really great. But having not as much of that in the college and having a lot more, deadlines and needing to follow up with that and learn how to work with professors and whatnot. Um, in addition to the rigor itself of the actual academics, like the classes were like objectively harder, right? And as such, I think that helps you to succeed. So like for me right now, I transferred to the University of Minnesota after finishing at M-State. And and I would say that like what it did was it really put this fundamental idea of, you really got to get your stuff done. You got to take accountability for yourself. You're the only person that can make you succeed, and learning those things really young can be so helpful, not only in academics, so you keep getting good grades, but just in life, I think. I know because it's accountability. If you can hold yourself accountable for all you have going on, you're gonna do a lot better in life overall. And that's something that I've learned to be extremely beneficial from dual enrollment. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess just going off of that, I completely agree. I think I may have sounded a little bit like I didn't like dual enrollment at the beginning of this webinar. I love dual enrollment and I highly recommend it for any high schooler to do it just because it's not only going to give you college credit, but it also just helps you like get the vibe of what college is really like before actually like not wasting money, but like having money put into it and realizing, oh no, like I don't know what's going on, like it's hard, like and having like I don't want to say safety net, but yeah, safety net of like high school advisors, teachers, faculty, other friends. It's so amazing and I highly recommend it. But yeah, the rigor it was obviously very different, and I'm so grateful to have that experience so early on, like Maxwell had said, because going from high school like curriculum, like 7, like 8 hours a day, like I personally thought high school was a little bit, yeah, easier for sure, but it's also super helpful to go to college a little bit sooner so you can actually see how to set up your classes, what's the best study methods for those courses, syllabuses, stuff like that. I think was super critical and super important. And the expectations, honestly, I love college so much because the expectations are so different from like high school. Like obviously everybody thinks that like you have to be like I don't know. Like classes are only like for 1 hour while you sit in like another high school class for 2 hours and you can't use the bathroom and you can't do all this stuff. I don't know. It was definitely a different experience and I'm so grateful to have had that in high school and be able to do that. And some of the support I was able to get that helped me succeed was obviously my friends and advisors I had in those classes were able to help me. And the professors are just so amazing at the community college level that they're so understanding about you being like high schooler and like they're really supportive. Like I never felt like I wasn't welcome there. But anyways, that's my answer.
All right, and then I guess I will finish out. So as I kind of mentioned, as we keep talking about, I guess, our experience is very different. When it came to the rigor, part of the structure again with middle colleges is that they mirror pretty much exactly with the college, in that they are highly rigorous. They are very competency-based education structured in that if you aren't making 80% mastery, which is where the 8% came from earlier, if you aren't meeting that, it means that you are behind. It means you are not understanding, which means you are technically in their eyes failing. Um, with that being said, they do a lot to try and help you fix that. Anyone I knew of who wasn't getting an 80% often was because they either were highly overworked because of other life capacity of things, things like working multiple jobs, or they weren't applying themselves. And that's, generalization, but that's from my personal experiences who were in the high school with us. Um, Purely because there was that much support from the teachers. We had classes small as 15 people at most. Um, you had a lot of choice in your schedule past the baseline of like, hey, you have to take these because the state said so kind of spots. And then the integration with dual enrollment in the sense of, okay, at a certain point, we're going to stop offering Spanish, go take it at the college kind of vibe. And, those types of things, it made it so that the courses, while yes, they were hard to manage sometimes, and that college level work on all fronts, and I'm over here like, algebra and I are not friends. So, trying to do that and also learn how psychology worked in my first college class. Yeah, maybe not the best combination sometimes. But when it came to making sure everything was even across the board, like I had an easy class versus a hard class, it was very well rounded. And we got support from our teachers. We had a social emotional learning coach. We had a lot of electives we could poke around in. There was a yearbook class, and that counted as a credit. For example, I actually had a class that was essentially doing policy advocacy in high school, believe it or not. And a lot of those other things where you could work with our guidance counselors, you can work with our sped people, all the things where you were very well supported. And then at the college, even if you don't understand what's going on, your person with, forget the term, but like the homeroom teachers and stuff, they were always checking up with it. And you had senior capstone professors you'd end up getting, and they were also very on top of stuff with you. Everyone was kind of learned about college, so that way when you had issues, if you didn't feel comfortable going to the other staff, someone could help guide you and liaise in between. So, that helped a lot with being able to finish everything. A lot of us kind of can reference like we felt like our teachers were our best friends, and our professors were too. So it wasn't, yes, it was difficult from like yes, you did have to have certain grades. Yes, but at the same time, it wasn't difficult to get them because you were that well supported to do so.
Yeah, thank you all for that. I think that was very insightful. Sharing how, yes, dual enrollment courses were more rigorous, but there was also the safety net. You had the faculty, you had the teachers, you had your colleagues supporting you, going through these similar experiences. So it's really good to hear that. Before moving on to the next question, just a reminder to the attendees, we're going to be allotting some time at the very end for audience Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to load those up on the chat. But yeah, without further ado, our next question centering on credits. Were your dual enrollment credits transferable to your current or intended college? And how did that impact your educational pathway or costs for your college education?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah.
No.
So yeah, I can say my credits transferred pretty well for the requirements. Actually, now that I think of it, there were two components of it. First off, the credits themselves, I got my elective requirements like completely knocked out, which is incredible. That's a huge part of what delays the bachelor's degree overall, and can sometimes lead to like burnout. And then the other thing, this might just be Minnesota state law, but if it's not, if it's a federal thing, then correct me because I'm not sure. But for us, because I had a liberal arts and sciences associate's degree, it waived my gen eds. So I didn't have to do that entire component of my degree. So again, I don't know if that's across the country. You guys can correct me if that's how it is, but either way, in Minnesota, that is how it is, and that's been super duper helpful. And in terms of my educational pathway, it knocked off a year. So perfect. It was wonderful. I'm still just super duper happy that it at its core also in terms of the pathway prepared me really well. My grades have been good, from the get-go, and that I don't think would have been possible if it wasn't for the support of dual enrollment. But yeah.
I would say yes, I think all my stuff transferred pretty easily just because I think staying in state helps a lot with that just because I know there's like we call it like the gateway credit. So obviously even if you didn't do concurrent enrollment, you can start at a community college and transfer those credits to another university. So there was already kind of a system set up for those credits to transfer. There's obviously like always issues, especially with those higher classes that you take and they don't want to take them for some reason. But usually next to like your transcript, it'll say like GT way 2. So it just means that you can able to transfer it. And most of our credits were able to transfer, especially being at a community college, they already know a lot of them are going to transfer. So I was very lucky to not have any issues. But I know like even like kids that went to like other colleges are having issues with that. So it's definitely like still much there. And I think I heard problems with students transferring out of state with those credits having problems. So I haven't had any issues, but I know there is some underlying problems.
And I will close us out on that. So again, I'm very fortunate. Everything transferred. The only credit that did not was a essentially introduction to the tech school 1 credit 3 week. Hey, here's how Blackboard works class. So pretty much everything went pretty well. I was able to take all 30, well, again, 36, so 35 of all of my credits that I did, and directly apply them to my degree. I went to our state school. Thankfully, this is something where, again, thankful for South Carolina. We have a course articulation agreement statewide. Every institution that is publicly funded is required to have essentially a set amount of courses that transfer between all colleges present. So things like an English 101 is the same every single place. Things like a Spanish, same thing every place. And so when I came to the University of South Carolina, which is where I am currently at, every single thing transferred. Now, granted, did they count in weird spots in some places? Yes, but they counted. So my math actually counted as an elective. My college algebra, I worked blood, sweat, and tears for. Didn't count correctly, but my statistics did, my psychology degree classes and sociology, every single thing went through and got done what we call Carolina Core. So the gen eds, we just call them. USC is very prone to naming everything after itself. So Carolina Core, all the things. And so I was able to get my essentially year and change done first year, where I was able to get into my political science courses early and also start my degree in social work in sophomore year, where I was not, it's very rare to do a dual degree in those two things here, social work especially because of how structured it is. Where everything kind of went together and didn't really cause issues. Most people who do these kinds of degrees take anywhere between 6 to 8 years. I'm graduating on time in 4. Very much nice in that component and price because would not have been affordable. And I've managed to, graduate and doing it again. And I've not had a crazy amount of loans. Definitely still have loans, but not crazy. And grand scheme have been able to afford the majority of my education. Um, so it definitely helped and sped things along, made things more attainable. Um, I cannot even imagine what it would have been like without it. So can definitely attest that it did more than it ever could have imagined, really.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that you all had no troubles with course transferability, but it does seem for like out of state students that is kind of like a larger conversation where there are a lot of more troubles with course transferability, and hopefully that's some work we can continue to do to see how we can make dual enrollment courses transferable for all students regardless of the institution they choose to go to. Um, but we kind of talked about this a little earlier, but now we have like a formal question dedicated to this. What kind of academic advising or guidance did you receive before and during your dual enrollment courses, and what improvements would you suggest for that?
Yeah, so for this one here, my system was set up so that I had a high school I think someone said the word homeroom teacher, that's what mine was too. But yeah, so we had a homeroom like main teacher, advisor at the high school level, and then I had another one at the college. Uh and honestly, I don't really know of any particular improvements other than just the fact that there could be better communication, I think, between the college and the high school. Because so often when it came to filling out forms, like I'd need to be the liaison, and send forms back and forth, and I couldn't really just give them each other's emails. So if that is something that is worth keeping an eye on, I think that was an issue that I faced. So yeah.
My situation, going back to that one amazing advisor that was in charge of all of our high schoolers from freshmen to seniors, she was practically the only person that was allowed to kind of academically advise us on the college courses. Like we obviously like had homeroom teachers, but they were for like just high school. So she was who we went to talk about courses. She was super busy. I respect her a lot and I appreciate everything she did for me, but she wouldn't be someone I would like constantly go for. She would only be there if like I was struggling in a class or anything like that. But we also had advisors at our community college who also were super busy because they were the only concurrent enrollment advisor for all the whole town. So there's like five other high schoolers are sending in concurrent enrollment students. So also kind of difficult, but they were really cool. They were amazing as well. Where I got most of my academic support, like before getting in, was definitely those advisors. But during it, we have Trio Upward Bound program, which is sort of for first generation, low income high school students. And they don't have to be concurrent enrollment, but they once you're in the program, they really push you to do it because obviously it's super helpful to be able to be concurrent enrollment. But I was able to go to community college where they had that program, like a area there, and they had like four advisors there willing to help with anything that you needed. And like they had planned trips, they planned life skill workshops, they helped plan college trips to other universities. And like that, like really, like not to say concurrent enrollment like didn't help at all, but that really pushed it over the edge with how amazing and how forthcoming it was with like getting me into college and like more ready and prepared. So definitely the True Upward Bound program helped so much more, and they do push like a lot of students to do concurrent enrollment when they're in that, just because those are like a lot of first gen low income students. So I guess like some more improvements would definitely be like those advisors and like educating a lot more advisors overall, because there was also like a lot of turnover with the advisors at the concurrent enrollment at the college just because it's such a hard job and they like were so tired and overwhelmed. So maybe just helping with that. But also supporting programs that do help high school students get more life skills and college experience like Trio. And that is my answer.
Okay, so for me, as I've kind of mentioned, we did have a lot of guidance throughout the entirety of the process. Before was definitely not much. It was just kind of your basic appointment you have with your advisor in like middle school. Hey, have you thought about where you're going to high school? No? Okay, here's options. Here's these two that do a lot of dual enrollment. Figure it out, kind of vibe. So definitely could deal with a bit more of explaining because as a pre-tween at that point. you don't barely even know how to use Google fully, much less to research very well. And while yes, that's what the parents are for, you also need to have some involvement in your own education. So like could deal with some more awareness on that front. Um, During the actual process of dual enrollment, I had a lot of advice. Pretty much all of our teachers knew of every single course we had eligibility to take, and were very willing to talk about them with us. And oftentimes could get a lot of support that way. Our guidance counselors gave us a lot of support. The only thing I would, look at was that we did have some turnover, just because, that something is very common in with higher ed as a whole is that there's turnover. But additionally, so with that, we didn't necessarily talk too much about application because, as a whole, a lot of these courses do transfer in to our institutions. However, they don't necessarily tell you how to track them. So a lot of students had the support and learned how to do things like getting the associate's degree. I had enough credits where I could have if I tracked them properly, but I didn't. And so those kinds of things of talking about like how to track them, or even, hey, you want to go into this XYZ degree, no matter where you're going, here's kind of courses that are offered at the college that may be up your alley, that you're eligible to take. Those kinds of things were lacking sometimes. So I would definitely recommend that that could be improved upon. But grand scheme, I would say that past just knowing the application towards degree, and the tracking components and turnover, that's really the only things I would recommend be improved. And some of them are just kind of a problem in the field right now, not necessarily school specific, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and a term that I heard pretty frequently was like turnover. So just having like a constant staff member being able to be there to support the student. Speaking from my experience too, we didn't necessarily have like a designated counselor, but we would have counselors who would stop by maybe like one day out of the week. And it was kind of just like an open session for all the students to come in. So it was really hard to get like individualized time to get individualized questions answered. So I really second that point of like the turnover and wishing I had more support with that advising front. Um, and now as we close up with our last question, I'm dropping it in the chat. But in what ways has participating in dual enrollment influenced your college readiness, career goals, or confidence in pursuing post-secondary education?
For me, I definitely like straight up would have not gone to college if it wasn't for the concurrent enrollment program. My father did really push me to, but I really didn't know what to expect going to college. I didn't have anybody in my family or even like friends that like went to college, so it was never in the cards for me before doing concurrent enrollment. And especially like we haven't really talked about it, but you save so much money, like an incredible amount of money. And it's just so like nice because it also pushes you to want to do so good in that course and like want to do well in it. So it's also had, as Maxwell had said, it's about accountability, getting prepared and being able to take care of yourself in that credits. Like it just really does prepare you for college life. And I think that's super, like a lot of students just directly go from high school to college in a whole nother state, sadly, and like are just so overwhelmed. And like I feel like that would have totally been me and I would have dropped out. But luckily I'm almost finished college. But yeah, it just helped me a lot in college readiness, being able to take accountability. Career goals, yes, like being able to like take courses that interest you and obviously pass them. But like if you just want to take like I took a couple engineering courses, I took a couple writing classes, and I like kind of was able to say like fill out which one I was interested in without having to pay anything. And then yeah, my confidence had definitely gone a lot better, absolutely. But I'll hand it over to Lenyx.
I would say it did a lot. My school, with the way it was structured, was very unique and did a lot to help me. Because what it did as part of the stuff with dual enrollment and everything else, we actually required to have a senior capstone. That was a component for graduation. We also we were required to have service hours. We actually had to have 200 to graduate. So quite a lot. And had to be verified too. So I worked with a foster closet. I did Fall for Greenville, which is a really big organizational thing, with other fostering related programs, and had to do that capstone. And a lot of people there's kind of two different pathways. There's the internship, which people would do where a lot of people like went to medical offices. Then there was a version where it was essentially, getting to do a more artisanal version. And then the TD Convention Center kind of stuff. Things like getting your firefighters certifications and EMT. I went the internship route because at the time I was like, I want to do law stuff. And doing things in the internship, I was actually the first person in our school at the time to actually go intern in the law office. And it told me that I like learning law, but I don't necessarily want to do lawyer things, which is how I changed a lot of my pathway to going into policy, social work, that kind of thing. And definitely saved me money on the thinking I wanted to do law school. Because no, that is not cheap. But when it came to that, it helped me see like what business casual looks like. How do I go to a courthouse? What is a courthouse? How do I find it? Doing things like knowing how I wanted to go through things because my advisor for that internship was actually a social worker and told me like, have you ever thought about macro work? And I pushed him off because like, I don't really know. Got to college. He was right. Thank you, Mr. Watley. You knew your things. But those kinds of things that help shape a lot of what my career things ended up being, where those really, realizations I probably would have had last year, this year, I had before I even got to college. So I wasn't changing my degrees constantly, wasn't, having to fight with I did a year and a half of biology and now I'm screwed because I need to fix that. Those kinds of things weren't happening. And it helped me a lot, even looking at how I want to do post-secondary stuff when it comes to, going to go get my master's in social work and doing a PhD in policy. Those kinds of considerations I probably wouldn't have realized until way too late to afford them, where I feel a heck of a lot more prepared when it comes to, how to do professional things and, what that looks like in practice. I cannot be more thankful to my school for what they did for me because I keep finding more and more ways as I've gotten older and gotten more into higher ed how they've set me up for success. So
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear the positive impact that dual enrollment has had, but I'm also very fortunate that you all were able to share your experience to highlight some of the things that we can continue to improve as we hope to expand this to make this accessible for all of our learners. So as we close out, I just want to give a huge thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. So Lenyx, Vashti, Maxwell, for sharing their insights. I hope that what we've learned today to continues to impact our work to ensuring the success of every learner. TSC is excited to share some of the work that we're taking on. As we continue our dual enrollment advocacy month, we encourage you to continue engaging with our work. Please head over to our website at todaysstudents.org to check out a recent brief highlighting promising practice for parenting students found on the Our Impact tab in our resources.